You know what they say about financial brokers? We're trained to see the crash before it happens. We study the charts, we measure the volatility, and we calculate the exact moment an asset becomes a liability. My name is Kyle Foster. I'm 38 years old, and for a decade, I was one of the top senior brokers at Henderson and Associates in Boston. I could spot a bad investment from a mile away. Yet I spent 8 years pouring my soul into a marriage that was essentially a high-stakes bubble waiting to burst. Jenna and I met at a charity gala. I was there to schmooze. She was there to run the show. She was an event planner, a whirlwind of energy in a midnight blue dress that seemed to pull all the light in the room toward her. I fell fast. It was a 3-month courtship, a 3-month engagement, and a wedding overlooking the Atlantic that looked like a scene from a movie. In the beginning, her spontaneity was the oxygen I didn't know I needed. My life was numbers and spreadsheets. Hers was color and chaos. She'd rearrange the furniture while I was at work just to shake up my energy. She'd plan surprise trips to Vermont or Maine, leaving me to guess the destination until we crossed the state line. It was refreshing. It was fun, but there was a shadow to her light. Jenna didn't just like surprises. She lived for pranks, and as the years went by, the pranks shifted from cute to cruel. It started with her jumping out from behind doors to watch me drop my coffee. Then it was a fake spider hidden in my briefcase, which I discovered in the middle of a meeting with a billionaire client. I laughed it off. I told my friends, that's just Jen. She doesn't mean any harm. I was promoting her brand of humor while she was slowly devaluing mine. By our 3rd year, I had secured a senior position. We bought a stunning brownstone in Beacon Hill. I was handling the portfolios of Boston's elite, people for whom reputation was more valuable than gold. Jenna's pranks started becoming more public, more designed to make me the punchline in front of an audience. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, assuming it was the price of admission for loving a woman so vibrant. I had no idea I was letting her dig a grave for our relationship. One joke at a time. By the 6th year, our marriage had become a study in contrast. My mornings started at 5:30 a.m. The gym, the markets, the intense pressure of moving millions of dollars before lunch. Jenna's business had exploded too. She was planning high-end corporate retreats, which meant she was often traveling. We were like 2 high-performance machines running on separate tracks, only clicking together during our sacred Sunday brunches. It was during one of those brunches that the first real tremor hit. My old college roommate, David Mitchell, called. He was back in town, fresh off a messy divorce and looking for a tether. Jenna's eyes lit up. "Bring him to the Gardner fundraiser next weekend," she said, her voice full of that trademark generosity. "The Clarks canceled, and we need a +1. The Gardner Museum fundraiser was Jenna's masterpiece. She'd spent 6 months transforming the courtyard into a Venetian wonderland. That night, she was a goddess in red silk. But as the night wore on, I noticed a shift in the data. Jenna wasn't just being a good host to David. She was hyper-focused on him. She laughed at his stories with a theatrical intensity. She touched his arm just a second too long. David noticed me watching and sidled up to me later. "Your wife is amazing. Kyle, you're a lucky man." "I know," I said, and I meant it. But the broker in me saw a pattern I didn't like. That night, as she unzipped her dress, the room felt cold. "Kyle," she sighed, her back to me, "do you ever feel like we're just predictable? Like we're becoming those boring, old married people? I think we're building a life, Jen. Stability isn't boring, it's the goal." She turned a mysterious, sharp smile on her face. "Maybe for you. But I might have to shake things up a bit if we start heading that way." I laughed it off. I thought she meant a vacation or a new hobby. I didn't realize that in her mind, shaking things up meant a controlled demolition of my dignity. 3 weeks later, we were invited to Tom and Rebecca's anniversary party at the Liberty Hotel. The irony of the venue wasn't lost on me later. A former jail turned into a luxury playground. The guest list was a who's who of my client roster. Richard Thornton was there, a man who controlled 40% of my firm's managed assets. I was deep in conversation with Richard, discussing a delicate offshore investment when Jenna drifted over. She was radiant in emerald green, a glass of champagne in her hand, and a glint in her eye that I should have recognized as a warning. "Excuse me, gentlemen," she said, her smile dazzling enough to blind. "Mind if I steal my husband for a moment? There's someone very special he needs to meet." I excused myself, offering Richard a polite nod, and followed her. She led me to a semi-private alcove. Standing there was a man I'd never seen, tall, impeccably dressed, with a smirk that looked practiced. "Kyle, this is James," Jenna said. Her hand lingered on his bicep. "He's new in town." "Jenna's told me so much about you," James said, his voice smooth as silk. "Funny," I replied, my internal alarm bells screaming. "She hasn't mentioned you at all." Jenna giggled, a sound that suddenly felt like nails on a chalkboard. That's because I wanted it to be a surprise." "What kind of surprise, Jen?" She exchanged a heavy, meaningful look with James. Then she turned to me, her face contorting into a mask of exaggerated guilt. "Kyle, I can't hide it anymore," she said. Her voice was rising, carrying over the music, drawing the eyes of the guests nearby. "James and we've been seeing each other for months. The hotel rooms, the business trips. It's him, Kyle. I'm leaving you for him." The room went silent. I could see Richard Thornton standing 10 feet away, his glass frozen halfway to his mouth. I could see my colleagues, my competitors, and our oldest friends. The blood drained from my face. My world didn't just tilt, it inverted. James stepped forward and put a possessive arm around Jenna's waist. "I'm sorry you had to find out like this. Man, we didn't mean to hurt you here, in front of everyone." I felt like I was underwater. Every instinct I had told me to swing, to yell, to defend my honor, but I didn't say a word. I just stood there, paralyzed by the sheer scale of the betrayal. Then Jenna burst out laughing. It wasn't a guilty laugh. It was a triumphant, mocking peal that echoed off the high ceilings of the hotel. "Oh my God," she shrieked, pointing at me. "You should see your faces. Kyle, especially yours. Priceless." Confusion rippled through the crowd. James pulled his arm away and extended a hand to me, his smirk turning into a professional smile. "Sorry about that, Mr. Foster. I'm actually an actor Jenna hired through an agency. No hard feelings, right? It was just a joke." The joke hit me harder than the affair would have. My wife had hired a professional to simulate a marriage-ending betrayal in front of the people who held my career in their hands. She had turned our private life into a cheap piece of performance art for her own amusement. I didn't laugh. I didn't get angry. With every ounce of self-control I'd spent 38 years cultivating, I managed to keep my voice steady. "Excuse me," I said. I walked away. I didn't look back at her. I didn't look at the whispering guests. I walked straight to the hotel bathroom, gripped the marble sink, and stared at my reflection. My jaw was clenched so tight it felt like my teeth might shatter. The door opened. It was Tom. "Kyle." "Man, what the hell was that?" "Jenna's idea of a joke," I said, my voice sounding like gravel. Tom leaned against the wall, his face full of pity. "That wasn't a joke, Kyle. That was cruel. That was an execution." I straightened my tie. I squared my shoulders. I know, in that moment, something fundamentally shifted. The asset that was Jenna Foster had just hit zero, and I knew exactly what I had to do. I returned to the party 5 minutes later. I didn't hide. I didn't sulk. I moved through the room with the practiced ease of a man who had just survived a market crash. I smiled. I shook hands. And I engaged in small talk, as if my wife hadn't just vivisected my dignity in public. Across the room, Jenna was the center of attention, regaling a group of friends with the details of how she'd found the actor and set the trap. She didn't look at me with concern. She looked at me as if I were a prop in her show. David sidled up to me, handing me a fresh whiskey. "You okay?" "I've been better," I admitted. "Kyle, look, when my ex started pulling stunts like that, it was because she'd already checked out of the marriage. She just needed to turn me into a villain or a fool, so she didn't have to feel guilty about leaving." His words landed like a punch to the gut. Was that what this was? A prank to mask a deeper exit strategy? The drive home was a vacuum of silence. Jenna tried to poke at me several times. Are you going to sulk all night? It was a joke. Kyle? Everyone laughed. I parked the car in the driveway of our Beacon Hill brownstone and turned to face her. What exactly did you hope to accomplish tonight, Jenna? She sighed. The sound of a bored child. I wanted to feel something. I wanted us to have a story. You're so sensitive. No one took it seriously. Richard Thornton took it seriously, I said, my voice cold. My firm took it seriously. Trust and reputation are my currency, Jenna, and you just spent it all on a cheap laugh. Oh, please, she snapped, crossing her arms. Maybe if you paid as much attention to me as you do your precious portfolios, I wouldn't have to go to such lengths to get a reaction. There it was. The grave she'd been digging. She wasn't sorry, she was justified. I need some space, I said firmly. Whatever, she called out as I walked toward the guest room. You used to have a sense of humor, Kyle. What happened to that guy? I stopped at the door, but I didn't turn around. He grew up. He built a life where respect is a requirement, not a suggestion. I slept in the guest room that night, or rather, I stared at the ceiling and conducted a cold audit of 8 years of marriage. By sunrise, I had my answer. I was out of the house before Jenna woke up. I ran 10 miles along the Charles River, letting the physical exertion burn off the last of the understanding husband I had left in me. By the time I got to the office, I was a different man. My assistant looked at me with wide, sympathetic eyes. Mr. Foster, Richard Thornton is on line 1. He sounds concerned. I took the call. Richard didn't mince words. Kyle, I valued our relationship for years, but after what I saw at the Liberty, I have to question your personal stability. If your own wife treats you like a laughingstock in public, how can I trust you to lead a board of directors? Richard, I said, my voice a calm, low vibration. What you saw was an error in judgment by a person who is no longer part of my decision-making process. I'd like to meet this afternoon to show you the Q4 projections for your primary account. I think you'll see that my professional capacity has never been sharper. I spent the day in a frenzy of high-level damage control. I made 3 successful trades that regained my firm's confidence. I secured Richard's account by proving that I was the calculated one, and Jenna was the volatility I was currently divesting from. That afternoon, Jenna called. I canceled my plans. Let's talk over dinner at Sorolina, neutral territory. I agreed, not because I wanted to reconcile, but because a public place was the perfect venue for a closing statement. When I arrived at the restaurant, Jenna was already there. She looked different, subdued. She was wearing a conservative black dress, her makeup minimal. She looked like she was trying to play the part of the repentant wife. You look tired, she said as I sat down. I had to spend 4 hours convincing Richard Thornton not to pull a 9-figure account because my wife hired an actor to call me a cuckold in front of him. I said, skipping the pleasantries. Her face paled. Kyle, I never thought. That's the problem. Jenna, you never think. You just perform. You felt invisible, so you decided to set me on fire so you could see the light. Well, you got your reaction. I took a sip of water and looked her dead in the eyes. I'm staying at a hotel for the next few days. My lawyer will be in touch to discuss the separation. The tears started then, real ones. Kyle, please. It was one mistake. We can go to therapy. I've already looked up doctors. It wasn't one mistake, I said, standing up. It was 8 years of me teaching you that you could disrespect me, and I would always be there to laugh it off. Well, the joke is over, and this time, I'm the only one who isn't laughing. I moved into a furnished apartment in Back Bay the next morning. I went dark. I blocked her on social media, filtered her emails to a folder I only checked once a week, and communicated solely through my attorney, Eleanor Watkins. Eleanor was a shark. You have a rock-solid prenup. Kyle, she told me, and frankly, the public nature of her stunt at the Liberty gives us significant leverage regarding intentional infliction of emotional distress if she tries to contest the assets. I don't want to destroy her, Eleanor. I said, I just want to divest over the next month. the glow-up began. Without the constant anxiety of Jenna's next prank, my performance at work skyrocketed. I wasn't just a senior broker anymore. I was becoming the face of the firm. But then, the data points shifted in a way I didn't expect. David called me. "You remember James, the actor from the party?" "Hard to forget," I said. He reached out to me on LinkedIn. He felt sick about the whole thing. Apparently, Jenna told him it was a consensual role play for your anniversary. When he saw your face and the way the room went cold, he realized he'd been used to harass someone. He's offered to sign an affidavit for your lawyer. Then came the letters from Jenna. Not texts, but handwritten letters. She wasn't just sorry. She was in intensive therapy 3 times a week. She had sent a formal apology to Tom, Rebecca, and even Richard Thornton, taking full responsibility for her cruel and infantile behavior. The most shocking move came from her lawyer. She wasn't contesting the prenup. In fact, she was asking for less than her entitlement. "I don't want his money," she told her attorney. "I want him to know that I finally understand that he isn't a prop." I sat in my quiet apartment, reading her therapy journal, which she had sent me a link to. It was a brutal self-examination of her need for attention and her fear of being ordinary. I let her dig her own grave. And in the darkness of that hole, she had finally found a mirror. 1 year later, I stood in my new office. I had left Henderson and Associates 6 months ago to start my own boutique investment advisory, Foster Ethical Wealth. I wanted to work with people who valued integrity as much as worth are. But to be I had leveled up in every sense of the word. My net worth had doubled. My confidence was unshakable. And for the first time in my life, my reputation was entirely in my own hands. "Need help with that last box?" I turned. Jenna was standing in the doorway. She looked healthy, grounded. She was still an event planner, but she had pivoted her business to focus on high-stakes communication and team building. She used her own failure as a case study in how to destroy and rebuild trust. "I've got it," I said, smiling, "but thanks for coming to see the new space." The journey back to each other hadn't been a whirlwind. It had been a slow, agonizing crawl through the wreckage. We hadn't gone back to our old marriage. That marriage was dead, buried under the floorboards of the Liberty Hotel. We had built something new, something with boundaries, something where respect was the first item on every agenda. David was dating Rebecca's sister now. Life had rearranged itself into a more stable pattern. That evening, as Jenna and I sat on the terrace of our new home, a place with no history of hidden spiders or public humiliations, she looked at me. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Not just walking away forever?" I thought about the cold audit I'd done in the guest room. I thought about the man I was then, a man who measured his worth by his client list. "No," I said. "I regret that it took a sledgehammer to wake us up, but I don't regret the man I had to become to survive it." Jenna reached across the table and squeezed my hand. There was no theatricality, no hidden agenda, just 2 people who had learned that the most expensive lesson you'll ever learn is the value of the person sitting across from you. Some lines can't be uncrossed, but if you're brave enough to do the hard work, you can draw a new line, a stronger one that doesn't just protect your assets, but protects your heart. I'm Kyle Foster. I lost a marriage, but I found a partner. And in the end, that was the best investment I ever made. She thought the prank was her masterpiece. She didn't realize that her regret would be my redemption. And now, we're finally playing for the same team.